Difficulty really is at some point there are so many regulations applying to data.
Everyone's making regulations and no one knows how that will actually play out in a court of law if that's required at some point. Those kind of uncertainties in the laws. And the other part is the uncertainties in the current political global climate, right? Things are changing in the US, right?
Understatement.
Yeah, I'm trying to be somewhat diplomatic here, right?
It's not like you, Christian.
No.
You don't have to do that. It's fine.
We had this whole DeepSeek AI thing, and everyone's kind of, well, you can't use the app or the web page. You have to run it locally to ensure that it doesn't leak any data back to Alibaba or to the Chinese government, right? So what do you do instead? Well, you open ChatGPT and you give all the data to your Americans.
We're getting a little bit philosophical, but nowadays everything has gotten so complex. Is it still really easy to identify what is sensitive and what isn't?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this podcast. Today, we are joined by my good friend, Mr. Jens de Koker, who works with me on a relatively regular basis, even though you're in Belgium, Jens. Greetings to Belgium.
Hi. Greetings from Belgium.
Yeah. I suppose, Jens, your role within Proact is essentially a product manager for our infrastructure environment. So can you give us a bit of a background on what you do on a daily basis?
Yes. So I'm indeed based in Belgium. I'm working for Proact as a product manager for everything related to infrastructure as a service. So that covers both our own infrastructure as a service, a cloud spread across multiple countries in Europe called Proact Hybrid Cloud, as well as the services that we provide on customer infrastructure on-prem and systems that we provide to them, and let's say as a cloud model.
Yeah. And I suppose, and this is the reason, I guess, for the point of this particular episode, because today we're talking about data sovereignty, which, it has to be said, is far more complicated than I thought it was going to be, having done a bit of reading on this prior to the episode. So we obviously do PHC in multiple countries, but the key point really is the fact that that's not even the half of it when it comes to data sovereignty, is it?
No, absolutely, it isn't. I noticed at one moment that we started talking about data sovereignty more and more. Questions came related to data locality and who has access to the systems, who manages the systems. Those types of questions arose more and more coming from our customers. So hence why we started looking into it. And one of the things that is interesting to think about is certainly that there is no real definition when it comes to data sovereignty or a sovereign cloud. There is no fixed definition. Nobody really knows what it's about. Every service provider kind of has their own definition for it. So anybody can call their own cloud a sovereign cloud, really, which makes it very interesting to think about. If how do we interpret sovereign cloud? How does another one interpret it? And especially our customers, how will they have to make the distinction between two providers calling their cloud a sovereign cloud if there is no fixed definition for it?
Absolutely. I mean, so even from a legal perspective, there's no definition for individual countries, or there's no definition worldwide, or different countries have different definitions.
Well, for me at least, it's a complicated subject, right? We've established that by now already. We're just a couple of minutes into the episode. For me personally, at least, there's just no definition. There is no, let's say, worldwide institution that provides a definition. There is no country that provides a definition. So, it's kind of free for interpretation.
Now, does that mean marketing departments get a hold of it and then they do whatever they like with it? That sort of stuff. Is that the way it works?
Absolutely.
That one thing, and the other part is lawyers do the same, right? So you get marketing and lawyers, and you get technologists in the middle who doesn't understand any of it. And there we are, right?
Yep.
So hence the confusion, I guess.
Yeah. And to add on top, I think before a couple of years ago, everybody was talking about data locality.
Yep.
Right? That was the thing. Your data needed to be local in the region for whatever reason, privacy related things or regulations or whatever. And then all of a sudden we switched from data locality to data sovereignty. But it's for somebody who hasn't researched the item, the two might seem synonyms. But they for me personally at least, they aren't. Data locality is just a subset of data sovereignty. Data sovereignty talks about a lot more. I think I tend to summarize it as the different laws and regulations applying to certain sets of data. Privacy data or whatever, or personal data might have different regulations applying to it. And data locality, for example, might not just be enough.
Understood. So this is like GDPR, whereby it's PII, personal identification information. Is that what PII stands for?
Personally identification information, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So with regard to that, then sovereignty comes into it rather than locality. It becomes more of a legal terminology. And I suppose the US Cloud Act is what is going to be the same.
Absolutely. I think the difficulty really is at some point there are so many regulations applying to data, and so. For example, us in Europe. So there's European regulations, there's country regulations, and indeed there's the US Cloud Act, and all of those regulations apply to or might apply to a certain set of data, and it's just gotten immensely complicated to understand which type of regulation really applies to which type of data. So just funny anecdote. The other day I asked ChatGPT to summarize data sovereignty for me, and summarize what regulations apply to which type of data. But there's no ending. It just keeps going. And if you think you've reached the end, then you ask another question, and what about that type of data? Then it just keeps going.
Yeah, I did a bit of digging on this, and the key element here is the fact that if a company in Germany, say, stores their customer database in a US-based cloud environment, then that's subject to both GDPR law and US Cloud Act law. But in the reverse, if the customer is if the US cloud provider, let's say AWS or Azure, has a data center in Germany, because they're a US company, then even though the data is held in Germany from this customer, the customer's database is held in Germany, it's still subject to US Cloud Act because it's an American company, even though GDPR will restrict the fact that you can't get that data out. How does that work? But it's like, so, I don't know.
I think no one actually knows how it works because it hasn't actually been tried in court yet, right? Which is kind of stuff. So everyone's making regulations and no one knows how that will actually play out in a court of law if that's required at some point. And that also, I think that's one of the things why Jens is getting more questions about data sovereignty now than before, is also because of those kind of uncertainties in the laws. And the other part is the uncertainties in the current political global climate, right? Things are changing in the US, right?
Understatement.
Yeah, I'm trying to be somewhat diplomatic here, right? So
it's not like you, Christian. No, you don't have to do that. It's fine.
It's true. But the thing is, right now, we don't know what might come out of the US regulation-wise for the American companies doing business in Europe, having created their own kind of sovereignty rules in Europe by having regional data centers. So if the US unilaterally now just says that the Cloud Act is out, the new administration says that we're going to harvest all of the data, which they might do by an executive order yesterday, right? You never know. Then what? How can anyone manage or navigate that environment right now? It's really, really hard.
I know it's kind of politically sensitive, but it does make me smile that there's a lot of the what's the word, challenges around use of, so let's say, for example, Russian and Chinese equipment over the last many years has been primarily led by the US, because in theory, the government in China could read all the data. Well, actually, that's exactly what the US Cloud Act says for the US. So yes. I just thought, okay, I didn't even realize it was quite that aggressive, but it's like, oh, well, you can't do it, China, but we do it all the time. That's fine. That seems a bit odd, doesn't it? But there you go. At odds.
So if we don't have a definition of what it is and we don't know how it's going to be implemented, how can a customer navigate this, right? How can you consume a service that you don't know where your data is being put? Right now, there is a kind of a stalemate, or a kind of a status quo that everyone's kind of happy with. It works, we think. But that's until something changes, right? And that's where the problem is. So that's why I think the PHC, or the Product Hybrid Cloud that Jens mentioned, is one of those things that might actually have some sort of answer to that, because it's kind of, compared to the big hyperscalers, it's hyperlocal, right? It's a very local install. You have one in Sweden, which is Swedish, right? Other people from other countries might use the Swedish one, but they know it's in Sweden, right? It's specifically there. It doesn't replicate its data everywhere else. We don't know what Azure or AWS is doing with that. And you might have the ability to fail over to another region, so your data needs to be there. So which laws then apply? So I think, especially in Europe, the resurgence of smaller, really sovereign, smaller scale providers actually has a really good go-to-market strategy, or a way to talk to customers right now about it, because you can provide a similar sort of flexibility that you can with a hyperscaler, but you ensure that your data isn't affected by an executive order by an orange guy over the pond, right?
Does he have to be orange?
Well, looks like it.
Maybe.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
What are your thoughts, Jens?
No, it indeed, and a local service provider removes a lot of the uncertainties that Christian mentions. You remove the dependency, or the risk that you have on foreign nations' regulations that might turn around from the one moment to the other. And as always goes within the industry that we work in, you don't turn around your entire infrastructure or environment from one day to the other. I mean, it has a very large impact. So something that you can't foresee coming might have a big impact. So maybe better to already prepare. An interesting question that I got from an existing customer actually the other day is, how can we be sure that our data resides in the country?
Yeah.
So the logical question, it's in the contract. We're going to honor the contract. This customer, so it's a logical question. How can I be sure? I was like, how are we going to prove it? I mean, I can show you the system. Then
that's right. It's that disk there and that disk there. That sort of stuff. Yeah. Take them for a tour of the data center.
Yeah, that doesn't show the customer that the data hasn't been replicated somewhere else.
No,
at all.
How can a customer
cynical
really?
Question.
How can that's where the customer's coming from, right? That's what. Hence the question.
How can I be really, really sure? Yeah, okay, well, you kind of have to take our word for it.
Trust me, dude. That's it.
But it's a logical question. I mean, it kind of proves the uncertainty that lives in the market. Yeah, you're saying that data is in the country, but can you actually prove it? And besides from a contract, which is eventually just a piece of paper, can we actually prove it? And then in the end, I went talking to the technical guys, and yes, we can say that, your data resides on this data store, and this data store goes on this system, and this system is installed there. And, can we actually show this level of information to our customers?
Yeah, it's one of those situations, isn't it? I suppose even then we're, to a certain extent, we're giving up security information as well. So you've got to be very, very sensitive about what you provide security information wise. So even if it is to your customers, because you don't want your customers' data to be vulnerable. So you don't want that information to be freely available.
Yeah, and I think this also in a kind of a longer, if you kind of take that thought and do a longer process on it, it kind of boils down to, from a customer perspective, is it wise to put all your data, your sensitive personal information or whatever it might be, with a provider at all? Or should you keep that local within your control and your own kind of regime? And if you blow that away, it's kind of your own fault. And then use other services, be it from hyperscalers or from local providers or whatever, for other parts of the data that isn't that critical or isn't that sensitive, right? So I think this also boils down to the fact that, is it a good idea to go cloud first and cloud always, regardless of who the provider is? Or is the better way of actually doing this is keeping your own data close in a hybrid model and using the services that are available at scale from the providers for different sets of data?
Yeah, I think this is it. This is where this is a two-pronged issue, isn't it? Or multi-pronged issue, in the fact that if you provide it with, let's say, for example, we're thinking of threat protection, breaches, things of that nature. If you put your data with a hyperscale cloud provider, they have probably, and any cloud provider, let's say, include ourselves within this as well, of course, we spend a lot of money and a lot of time working on our security infrastructure to make sure that data is secure. And that means that we do multiple different levels of protection on that. We're looking at data that's going in and out with regard to sort of next generation firewalls. We're looking at, we're micro-segmenting that data so that data can't be interfered with between individual systems. We do a lot of work and we do SIEM on that data to make sure that nothing unusual is moving. There's a lot of stuff going on inside that data. And all the cloud providers are doing this sort of thing. If you do it yourself, you then have to go and buy all those individual products and have the know-how necessary to be able to use them. So while you're giving away your data to another party, that to a certain extent may then mean that you are in breach of or challenges with regard to data sovereignty law, what you're gaining is a lot of security and a lot of protection and a lot of knowledge that you don't necessarily need yourself. And that's a really difficult balance for business to judge.
Yeah, it is. But then again, I think the way to address that is keep the most precious data you have, the stuff you can't really lose or you can't really have to ensure that doesn't fall into the wrong hands. You have to keep that in-house and keep that for yourselves. But then get all of the services around it from a provider, right? Get everything that isn't core business, get that out, use it, consume it as a service, but keep your core business stuff local and ensure that you know how to protect that. If not, you don't. I mean, we had this whole DeepSeek AI thing a week or two ago, right?
Have you signed up and had a look?
Yeah. So, and everyone's kind of, well, you can't use the app or the web page. You have to run it locally to ensure that it doesn't leak any data back to Alibaba or to the Chinese government, right? So what do you do instead? Well, you open ChatGPT and you give all the data to the Americans instead. So it's the same thing. We mentioned it earlier, right? So, I mean, run sensitive stuff locally and non-sensitive stuff externally. That's kind of the only thing that makes sense.
Yeah. There you get into now we're getting a little bit philosophical, but yeah, is it nowadays everything has gotten so complex? Is it still really easy to identify what is sensitive and what isn't? Because it's it adds, because right now we're talking about multi-cloud, hybrid cloud. Indeed, keep your sensitive stuff close, and maybe the not so sensitive stuff a little bit further away, and count on a service provider to take care of that. But is it really clear for customers what they should keep close, or has it all gotten a little bit too complicated by now?
Yeah. I mean, what a look at Office 365, perfect example. And the fact that at the end of the day, that's everything that you write on email, everything that you send as a chat message to your teams and to your employees, every document that you ever create, every Excel spreadsheet that you ever do, every PowerPoint presentation you ever create, all of that will contain PII at some point. It's going to. And none of that is locally. It's all in Microsoft SaaS environment. So again, it's like, how do you differentiate that to say, well, that's my important data? Well, it kind of is, because your business runs on that on a daily basis. But that's the first thing that you go and give to an external party.
So it adds on top of the complexity again. And sometimes I think coming back to data sovereignty now, all of the different rules applying and personal data and stuff. Is it something that a customer already proactively thinks about, or are they just going along with the complexity and thinking about it retroactively? They set up everything, gotten complex and whatever, and then all of a sudden, oops, we need this data sovereignty still. So we're trying to fit it into the all complicated the complicated environment already, and maybe bringing something back, but then indeed just leaving Office 365 basically wide open.
Yeah, it's just treating that as we just need it. It became important from the point of view of business use, and therefore became less important from the point of view of data sovereignty, because we need that product. Therefore, we're prepared to sidestep our sovereignty issues almost.
Yeah. But again, it depends on what kind of customer it is, what kind of what they actually do. I know about customers here locally that produce things. Let's put it that way.
Don't be too vague about this.
No, I have to be, to be honest. But the things they produce are everything's stored locally, everything's processed locally, everything regarding the things that they produce are local. Everything that is not is going out to a cloud provider somewhere, because that's their IP, right? The things they produce, that's their the reason they exist as a company is the things that they produce, and they are proprietary things that I don't want to have leaked anywhere, right? Okay. So they keep that local, and then they move everything else, HR, salary, whatever, is hosted externally and whatever.
In SaaS providers.
Yes. Yeah. So, or in an instance in Azure or whatever it might be, right? So they're kind of doing, as you said, they're putting PII data into the cloud providers, but they're keeping their kind of core IP, the reason to be, the reason they exist in the first place. All of that is local. So that's one distinction. That's one way of doing it, right? But it'll still be a GDPR issue if something happens without question. So
yeah, I mean there's also the grey area with regards to SaaS providers are great. I think at the end of the day we all I know from personal experience the amount of time that it has saved this business and many other businesses with regard to the way that the people work, with regard to the use of Office 365, accounting software, you name it, everything online, SaaS, Salesforce. All of these SaaS providers have saved no end of time for businesses, and they make the process a lot easier to understand. But you have sovereignty issues with regard to that as well, because if you sort of say, let's say, for example, you have a SaaS mail provider, mentioning no names, and you say, I'd like my data stored in, let's say, Germany, for the sake of argument. We've got our data stored in Germany because that's where we say it's going to be. Thank you very much. Now, your SaaS provider then comes up with a new intelligent AI-based engine to interrogate that data to look for PII. let's say. Now, this is a feature of the product, and they're not storing the data, but they are interrogating it. So in theory, but that engine doesn't necessarily need to be in Germany. That engine could be anywhere, and essentially is trawling your data and maybe storing subsets of it to say, oh, look, there's PII here, there's PII there, there's PII the other.
At the very least, it's handling metadata about your data.
Exactly. And it's outside of the environment that you said was acceptable for your data. Mm-hmm. And you have no visibility of that sort of stuff at all. Why would you? It's a feature of the product that you don't see. So again, it's even if we go to an environment that says, yes, we want this all to be in one location, it still could be used somewhere else or taken somewhere else to be viewed from something else, and elements of it stored somewhere else. So we just have no control over that. It's really difficult for the customer.
There's only one way to be truly, truly sure where your data is located, and that's when you do everything yourself. But then you lose that competitive edge again. You don't make use of the technology available today, which basically will give you that additional advantage in the market, like you say, using AI on data sets or whatever. You have to be a pretty advanced IT team to already install everything, every new feature and whatsoever that is available in the hyperscalers today to actually on your own infrastructure. So it's balancing everything out.
Yeah, and also I think the biggest struggle for customers here with doing that is, if you look beside the kind of legal or marketing or definition thing, is basically that how many customers does actually have all of their data categorized and tagged in a way that it makes sense to kind of figure out what goes where. I don't think there are that many that can actually do that and actually know what data they actually have, right? And I think that's going forward. I think that's going to be a really, really important thing for many customers is the ability to go in and actually categorize and tag and kind of figure out what data they have. Especially if you look at the whole AI thing as well, you need to do that to be able to utilize an AI large language model to do something with your data. You need to know what data to put in there. And how do you know that if you haven't categorized it?
You need a curator, don't you? Curator?
Yeah.
That's English.
Yeah.
So you need a curator who will say, right, okay, this is my latest data, therefore my AI model will learn from this. And I want to bin my old data and put in new data as it comes.
And a big part of that is also differentiating between what data can reside where based on the contents of it.
Mm.
And I don't think many customers have that function internally today at all. And that's going to be important.
Yeah, agreed. I think that probably depends on the size of your business as well.
Of course.
At the end of the day, certainly for, I suppose, even down to the extent that smaller companies tend to have IT teams that are kind of related to specific generalists that do everything. Medium-sized companies tend to have individual teams for individual services. But like you say, when it comes to things like data, what would you call it? Data classification? Who has an IT data governance teams? Yeah. Data governance teams only really appear in really large enterprises, generally. That's the way that it works currently. Maybe that's going to have to change.
But yeah, again, back to sovereign clouds. If we don't know what it is, how can we adhere to it? It's a strange thing, right?
I was going to say looking at other countries. We work for a European business, so we do a lot of stuff in the Nordics. We do a lot of stuff in England, Germany, Netherlands, you name it, around Europe, and a little bit in the US. But at the end of the day, different countries are coming up with different things. So Brazil have now done their own general personal data protection laws, which is similar to GDPR. Nigeria have done data protection regulations, which are now becoming the standard legal framework in Africa. The Middle East and Saudi Arabia and the UAE are doing their own, again, separately based upon their own. I'm sure China have their own. I'm sure Russia have their own. I didn't go digging that deeply. But the end of the day, it's going to be impossible to meet them all, isn't it? I think
Yes, that's the whole complexity. I think all the way in the beginning, it started with the Patriot Act, probably.
Oh, right.
And that,
Yeah.
that eventually evolved into the Cloud Act with, a couple of clauses less and a couple of clauses more, but still different name, the same thing. But then, it started with the Patriot Act, and then, the US implemented it, and the EU then went like, we need something against this, and we need to protect the EU, so we are going to create GDPR, and then, GDPR was created, another regulation to comply with. And then another country went, oh, they've got GDPR now. We need something too. And you get this massive growth of regulations that at one point,
Yeah.
I don't know. I honestly think that, not all of the customers, but most of them, do they really know what it's about?
No, maybe not.
Coming back to that same customer again, the simple question, hey, can I be sure that my data is in your country?
Yeah. It's intangible.
Never mind
isn't it?
about all the regulations. Just make sure
Yeah.
that it's in the country, please. You're this nationality. You're managing the environment, right? Yes. Okay. Never mind about all the regulations. I can make sure that it's in this country, managed by this personnel. We'll be fine.
Yeah. Okay, I think obviously it's a massive subject and we've only tickled the surface, I think, on this one. So I suppose moving forward, if we were to give one piece of advice one piece of advice to our customers with regard to this, or to businesses with regard to this, Jens, what would you think it would be to sort of, if you were going to talk to somebody today and say, right, this is what you need to look into with regard to data sovereignty?
Well, I think the most important part is that if a customer asks, I think the most important part is at least understand what regulations apply on your business. Because different regulations also apply on different businesses. For healthcare, for example, totally different than a commercial organization. So imagine you're in healthcare. At least understand what types of regulations apply, and understand that you just can't do anything that you can do. That there are indeed regulations like Cloud Act and so on applying on all of the sets of data that you are creating. That's the start. Understand what you're up against.
Good idea. Good, Christian.
Yeah, I think with the kind of ever-changing world that we live in, I'm kind of tempted to go with make sure you have an exit strategy of some sort.
Nice.
Things might change.
Don't trust
suddenly.
anybody, do you? Don't trust anybody.
No.
That's what it comes down to, right?
Yeah. So if you're all in on a cloud provider today, that's probably fine. I mean, it works. It probably works well for you. But make sure you have an exit plan in case something happens. I think there are signs right now that might point in the direction that things aren't probably going to change within the next year or two. So ensure that you have some sort of exit plan. You might not have a specific do this, do that, but give some thought to if your cloud provider all of a sudden doesn't meet the regulations you're under. How do you handle that? How do you work from there? I think it's a good idea to start thinking about that right now.
Okay, good idea, good thinking. And I suppose from my perspective, I'll probably go with your point, Christian, actually, which I think is really important with regard to this. When it comes to AI and utilizing that to be able to learn about your business data, and there's so much of a push towards that these days about businesses wanting to utilize their data more with AI giving them business advantage, etc. Build that in as part of this process and try and curate your data to the extent where you know where certain data needs to be. Try and get a handle on that, and then hopefully you can do two things at once. Get your AI sort of learning sorted as well, at the same time as trying to make sure that you have your data in the correct location. Thank you, guys. Very much appreciated. Thanks for joining in, Jens. It's been nice to see you again. And Christian, I shall see you next time.
Yeah.